Okay, today I want to talk about trauma. I'm not sure that he was the first one to make the distinction, but certainly I became aware of the distinction between so-called shock trauma on the one hand and cumulative or process trauma on the other. I became aware of that through the work of Masood Khan. Uh, Shock trauma, pretty obvious what that means. You are the survivor of a car crash, your plane goes down, um, um, you survive a terrible battle, a war situation in which people are dying around you. Uh, Shock trauma, the sudden death of someone very near and dear, uh, a brush with death oneself, shock trauma, um, suddenly being attacked and beaten, shock trauma. Process trauma, on the other hand, or cumulative trauma, is the sort of thing that we see in people who have to live for long periods of time in painful situations. Um, the pain of growing up in a family with, say, an alcoholic parent. Um, well, many other situations that the trauma is not sudden, it's continuous, and it accumulates. Cumulative trauma. Well, what is trauma in general? Let's go back to Freud. Uh, for Freud, trauma is an experience of helplessness in the face of being overwhelmed. He had the idea that we are protected from being overwhelmed by external stimuli and internal stimuli by what he called the stimulus barrier. Um, kind of a shield, but when that shield is penetrated or disintegrates, external stimuli flood in and we can't handle them. It's overwhelming and we are reduced to a traumatic state of helplessness, or internal stimuli overwhelm us and we are reduced to a state of helplessness. This is how he understands trauma. He went on to speak about what he called traumatic anxiety, precisely this experience of being overwhelmed. And he distinguished that from signal anxiety, which is a small dose of anxiety that is a warning that steps must be taken quickly or trauma is going to occur. And he enumerated the danger situations in childhood in which we find ourselves, situations in which we might be overwhelmed by trauma unless we take defensive maneuvers to prevent this from happening. In any case, uh, I'm going to speak personally about my recent trauma, and specifically about the fact that uh, I was unconscious of the fact that I was in a traumatic state. Uh, the people around me uh, also seemed largely unconscious of the fact that I was in a traumatic state. Um, and I recall in an earlier video on the subject of God, religion, spirituality, I recall saying in one of those videos that when I'm operating in the depressive position with secondary process thinking, I of course do not believe in God or in the supernatural or in magical thinking. But when I regress to the paranoid schizoid position, of course I believe in God and magical thinking. And of course, we oscillate between these two positions because there is good in PS as well as bad, and there's bad in D. What's bad in D is an excessive rationality, an excessively dispassionate rationality in which one can see all sides of every question and one therefore can become paralyzed and unable to act, fence sitting. Um, Whereas in PS, splitting predominates, all good, all bad. How can that be good? Well, do you want a life without falling in love, in which your love object is all good? Do you want a life in which you can't identify an enemy as all bad? Because if you don't, you won't be able to pull the trigger. And if we couldn't pull the trigger and kill, Hitler would have won. There is adaptive splitting and there is maladaptive splitting. But to the extent that there is a need to distinguish predators from friends, that's adaptive splitting. That requires us to visit PS. So we cycle between PS and D. But in that video, I had suggested that although I try to live my life mostly in the depressive position, thereby not believing in a supernatural God, I said, if and when I get the cancer diagnosis, I will be back at St. Mary Magdalene on my knees lighting candles. Well, I said that a few months before I got the cancer diagnosis, which occurred last October when a PSA test came in quite high, and then examination revealed a tumor, prostate, uh, and then biopsy revealed that it was cancerous. I'd always assumed that if I got cancer, prostate cancer, it would be like my father's. He had the slow growing kind, and they don't even treat it because you die of something else first. But no, I had the dangerous, fast growing kind. So, uh, so then I'm faced with the question, well, has it spread? So I had to wait for a CT scan, and that indicated that it probably had not spread. But I had to wait then for a bone scan. I mean, wait, because thanks be to God, we have socialized medicine in Canada, but you wait. There are lineups. The bone scan came in after Christmas and it was clear. So apparently there had been no metastasization. It was simply cancer of the prostate, a dangerous cancer that had to be treated. And then I had a decision. Did I want treatment by radiation and hormones, or did I want to go for surgery? I made the decision to go for the surgery because with surgery there is um, a hope for recovery of one's sexual functioning, whereas with radiation and hormones, probably not. Um, so I made that decision, and then of course I had to wait for the surgery, which didn't happen until April 25th. So between October something and April 25th, I'm living with the knowledge that I have a dangerous cancer that has to come out. It hasn't metastasized. But then, of course, there's the surgery, and there is a general anesthetic, and I have a pre existing heart condition and stents, and I have been known to go into atrial fibrillation on a few occasions. And of course, the surgeon is worried if I'm under a general anesthetic and I go into atrial fibrillation, will they be able to get the heart going again? So there was a slight risk I might die on the table, and I'm aware of this. But I carried on normally, my normal life, my normal travel, my teaching, my work with patients. I carry on, unaware of the fact that I'm in a traumatic state. Now, I had clues that I might have picked up on. Some of the clues were fairly large clues. One is that I use the alarm on my iPhone to wake me up in the morning, and I choose a song. And from October through till April, or May, I should say, the song that woke me up every morning was a song by the Nashville singer-songwriter Julie Miller, um, who wrote a song called All My Tears. And so it reads, when I go, don't cry for me. In my Father's arms I'll be. Sun and moon will be replaced by the light of Jesus' face. It don't matter where I lay. All my tears be washed away. And I will not be ashamed, for my Savior knows my name. Okay, now there's a little clue there, waking up to that every morning, that maybe death is on my mind. But I still didn't realize that I was in a traumatic state. I was in denial. I thought I could just carry on until the surgery. And furthermore, I thought that after the surgery, I would maybe take a few days to recover from the surgery, and then I would just resume my practice, which is what I did. Even while I'm sitting with a catheter and a bag, um, I'm resuming my practice. Now, of course, this was ridiculous. Uh, I should have probably stopped practicing when I first got the diagnosis and not resumed practicing for at least a month or so after my recovery. Now, of course, the good news is that last week my surgeon informed me that the latest PSA test is at 0, and the biopsy of all of the surrounding material indicates no carcinoma anywhere, so I'm cancer-free. I'm a cancer survivor, and the traumatic state has lifted, and I'm back functioning in the depressive position. And uh, um, but here I am, a psychoanalyst who's supposed to be alert to unconscious processes and to defenses, and I was not aware of how defended I was. I was not aware of how traumatized I was. Now, fortunately, the traumatic state appears not to have done a lot of damage, but it did do some harm. Kohut writes about the disruption repair cycle. In any analysis that reaches any depth, there will be disruptions, and sometimes the analyst's personality will be significantly involved in causing these disruptions. Analysts are human. We have our own problems, and sometimes they lead to suboptimal work, and sometimes the work is disrupted by these things. In any analysis that reaches any depth, this will happen. And so my state mostly did not disrupt the work with most of my patients, but it did disrupt the work with one patient. Um, and he and I are now repairing, attempting to repair this disruption. I think we will be able to repair it. The work is carrying on, and we will be able to learn from this experience. Um, I certainly have learned a lot from this experience. I've learned a good deal about my powers of self deception, my capacity for denial, my somewhat omnipotent notion that I can handle just about anything and carry on, my disinclination to look at my neediness, my vulnerability. Um, so, the day of the surgery, um, the hospital wanted to know whether I had insurance coverage for a private room or semi-private room, and I, in fact, had coverage for a private room. Uh, but somehow I wound up in neither a private nor a semi-private, but in a ward situation, large room with maybe about 5 beds, separated by those floor-to-ceiling curtains that wrap around. And um, during the months leading up, I guess because we share the same doctor, I saw several times in the waiting room. I saw a young woman wearing a hijab. The day of the surgery, she was in the waiting room. I tried to get into the crazy surgical gown and had no idea how to. And I stuck my head around, and she was already in her gown. And I asked my wife to come in and help me figure this thing out. She smiled. That woman smiled at me and said, "Yes, these are impossible." She wound up in the bed next to me after the surgery, separated by this curtain. I think her husband was there 24/7. I think he slept in a chair beside her, but she had many visitors. The whole village was there. And I don't know what they were saying. They were speaking Arabic and praying, and there were babies and grandparents, and I couldn't understand. And I'm waking up from morphine, and I am just thrilled that they're there. I'm so happy they're there. I can't understand, but they're praying. And in my own way, I guess I had been praying and was praying, and they were praying, and they kept me company. She left a day before I did. I was there 3 nights. She was there 2, and she stuck her head into my little cubicle as she was leaving and wished me good luck and said goodbye. I felt this connection with her and her family. Um, so yeah, I was in a traumatized state, but a lot of good things can happen in a traumatized state, a kind of openness, connectedness. Um, so, so I survived. I'm cancer free. I feel I've been given a gift. Um, Certainly, from a PS point of view, I'm interested in, well, I was given this gift for a reason. What's the reason? I've been given maybe another 10 years or more. What am I supposed to do? What am I being called to do with this time? Um, Carl Jaspers, philosopher Carl Jaspers, believes that we are being inundated with communications, messages, uh, coded messages God is trying to get through to us, sending us all these messages, but they're going right over our head for the most part. We don't even know we're being messaged. We don't know how to read the messages. Um, what's the message that my survival is sending me? What other messages might I be receiving? Well, a couple of months ago, the extension program of the Toronto Psychoanalytic Society asked a colleague of mine, younger colleague. I was part of his training in the psychotherapy program, and then I supervised one of his analytic cases in his analytic training. He's a lifelong evangelical Christian. Uh, and of course, I'm seen as some weird kind of Christian, religion friendly in a certain way, quite hostile to religion in other ways. But in any case, we were asked, the two of us, to do a 4-week course through our extension program on the topic of psychoanalysis and spirituality, which we've agreed to do. Filmmaker approached me, and he thinks that the camera likes me and I'm not intimidated by the camera, so he would like to do a film of some kind with me. And it's wide open as to what the topic should be, but it seems pretty clear to me about the only topic that I could get really very interested in at this point will have something to do with psychoanalysis and spirituality. Um, anyway, the point of this talk is to indicate that we may be in trauma and not know it. A few years ago, a committee of the Toronto Psychoanalytic Society was set up to study questions of illness and aging in analysts. And I couldn't contribute to their discussion. I was away at the time. But maybe this video is my contribution to their discussion. Um, it's very tricky. We're an aging group, and what happens when you sense that a colleague is beginning to show signs of early dementia? Or what happens when you recognize that a colleague is in denial of the fact that he's in a traumatized state? No one around me recognized that. I didn't recognize it myself. Um, I've learned a lot as a result. I've learned something about my capacity for my enduring, ongoing capacity for self-deception, for denial, my omnipotence, my idea that I can handle everything independently, that I'm fearless, all of which is nonsense. Um, Nietzsche says that which doesn't kill me makes me stronger. Well, this event didn't kill me. I hope it's made me stronger by increasing my self-knowledge, increasing my awareness that I can be in denial. I can be traumatized. Um, Now, this whole traumatic experience certainly has affected my thinking about spirituality. Um, I continue to make a big distinction between Christianity and religion. In fact, there's a book by James A. Fowler called Christianity is Not a Religion, and I sympathize very much with this position. Um, Christ came to attack religion. He did attack religion. One of the reasons he was crucified was the strength of his attack on the religious authorities of the time. So Christianity, in my view, is to be distinguished from religion and to be distinguished from the church. what then is it? What's my attitude towards it? I'm just beginning to be thinking this through. So that's a topic for future discussion. The point of today's topic was simply to discuss trauma and the fact that one can be in a traumatized state and not be aware of the fact. Another clue to the fact that I was in a somewhat traumatized or unusual state that I might have picked up on but didn't is the fact that at some point leading up to the surgery, I changed the signature file on my outgoing emails on my iPhone and added another quotation um, from a song by Julie Miller. Quotes, "I'm held by a hand with a scar," unquote. Now, I haven't yet removed that. I claim to be back in the depressive position. Haven't yet removed that from the signature file. So do I believe I'm held by a hand with a scar? I don't know. I mean, I'm agnostic on that question. Do I believe it? I don't know. Do I feel it? Yeah, I feel it. So evidently there's a split between my thinking and my feeling. In any case, I guess I feel it sufficiently that I'm leaving it in my signature file and making that the subtitle of this video. Okay.